All right, welcome to our last review video for America's Biblical Heritage Quiz number 4, which will be on Thursday. And this quiz is simply going to be a matching quiz. And so it's all matching. That's the good news. The bad news is that there's 32 questions and only 6 possible answers. And of course, these are the names that you'll need to match. The possible people that you'll be matching is George Washington, Ben Franklin, James Madison, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay. In some cases, in a couple of cases, not very many, but in a couple of cases, there may be 2 answers that you'll provide. Some answers may be used, obviously, there will be answers used more than once. Some of them might not be used at all. I'm not saying that they won't be or will be, all right? So you will just need to know what this is regarding, all right? I will say this, I hope you did take some good notes because I can't guarantee that I'm going to cover everything that's on the quiz. I'm going to try my best to get most of the ideas on here, but you definitely need to go over your notes regarding these different people, all right? And I know we didn't talk a lot about Jefferson, Hamilton, and Jay, but I did mention a few things about them. And so if I mention stuff about those people, you definitely probably want to know those things. Of course, dealing with George Washington, of course, we mentioned the fact, obviously, he was our first president, very important man. He was also commander of the Virginia Regiment, and we talked about early on in Washington's military career, he definitely was a big proponent of having military chaplains and believed that was a necessary thing. He also supported the idea of government funding for missions work to the Indians and pushed that, which obviously means that he wasn't, for government not being involved in any kind of church-related ideas as well. We mentioned the fact that he issued many different Thanksgiving and prayer, edicts. In fact, he gave us really our first Thanksgiving Day, although it wasn't voted as an actual American holiday. He's the one that gave us Thanksgiving Day the very first time. We mentioned the fact that George Washington is also known as the father of our nation. We mentioned the fact that he served in the Continental Congress. He also obviously served as our commander-in-chief of our armed forces during the American Revolution. He did seem to support the idea of compulsory support of religion, which of course we aren't very fond of, but the idea that basically if you supported a church, if you believed in a certain church, he believed that you should be forced to tithe to that church, and that was part of what Washington believed. We also mentioned the fact that Washington used several different phrases dealing with God. We talked about the smiles of heaven, divine providence, and those kind of things. We mentioned in regard to slavery that Washington did release all of his slaves upon, actually his will said upon the death of his wife, Martha. She ended up releasing all the slaves after his death, and so we mentioned that in regards to Washington. We also talked a little bit about Ben Franklin. Of course, we mentioned the fact that Franklin was a very brilliant man. He knew 5 different languages, although he had only 2 years of formal training. We mentioned the fact that he published what was known as Poor Richard's Almanac, which was second only to the Bible in popularity in the colonies during the time. We mentioned the fact that he was known as the Newton of his age. And that's mainly because of a lot of the inventions that he invented. Of course, he invented the Franklin stove, bifocals, lightning rods, swim fins, a urinary catheter, a long arm to be able to reach books. We also mentioned the phonetic alphabet that he established, as well as, of course, his experiments in electricity. We mentioned the fact that he was the first of several different things. He was the first postmaster. We also mentioned the fact that he proposed the idea of daylight savings time. He also co-founded the very first voluntary fire department and started the first library. And so he is a man of many firsts. He is also known as the father of the Confederation. And by the way, don't mix up all these different fathers. Washington was the father of our nation. Ben Franklin's known as the father of the Confederation. James Madison's known as the father of the Constitution. All right, so lots of different fathers here to remember. Don't mix them up. Of course, we mentioned the fact that Ben Franklin was also the oldest member of the Continental Congress at 81 years of age. He's also the only person to have signed 4 of the major founding documents: the Declaration of Independence, Treaty of Alliance with France, Treaty of Paris ending the Revolutionary War, and the United States Constitution. We mentioned the fact that Franklin had a wide variety of different beliefs as far as religious beliefs. More than likely, he probably wasn't a Christian. However, he was very good friends with George Whitefield, and we mentioned a lot of the different things regarding that. We mentioned, of course, James Madison. We mentioned the fact that he grew up and he was actually trained to be a minister, and that was kind of what his family thought he was going to be. He went to what later became known as Princeton. It was called the College of New Jersey at the time, but later was renamed Princeton. We mentioned the fact that he came under the influence of Reverend John Witherspoon, and a lot of Witherspoon's Calvinistic teachings really kind of shaped Madison's thinking for later on. We mentioned the fact that Madison had an early experience in childhood that heavily influenced him as well, and that was the idea of hearing Baptist preachers preach while they were in jail. Him and his father sat outside the jail and listened to Baptist preachers preach. It heavily shaped his ideas as far as religious liberty and the idea that everybody ought to be able to worship God the way they see fit. We mentioned the fact that Madison signed the Declaration of Independence. He was the youngest delegate to the Continental Congress, and he is known as the father of the Constitution. He was probably the best prepared of all the different founding fathers for that meeting. He's also the author of the Bill of Rights. He, with Jay and Hamilton, also put together what was known as the Federalist Papers. We also mentioned the fact that Madison outlived all the other signers of the Constitution and served as the president for 2 terms, and the only president to actually, while being president, lead troops on the battlefield. And of course, that was during the War of 1812 when the British sacked our capital and burned the White House. We mentioned several great quotes by Madison. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. We also mentioned the quote, all men having power ought to be distrusted. We mentioned that Madison had several different beliefs. He believed that the power must come from the people, and the government must be responsible to the will of the people through elections. We also mentioned that the government only has powers as the people delegate through covenant, the idea of consent of the governed. We also mentioned the fact that Madison believed that this idea of a covenant can't contradict the law of nature and nature's God. So the idea that every man has natural rights. We mentioned the idea that Madison supported separation of powers and checks and balances. He also opposed slavery, although he did own slaves. All right, He also was president of the American Colonization Society, who tried to help free slaves and send them to Liberia. And so we mentioned that about Madison. We mentioned some things about Thomas Jefferson as well that you might want to note. Of course, Jefferson was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. In fact, he was the author of the Declaration of Independence. However, Jefferson was not a signer in the Constitution. He was a minister in France during the time of the Constitution, and that probably was a good thing since some of Thomas Jefferson's religious beliefs probably wouldn't have been very helpful there for that. Of course, we mentioned things about John Jay, and Alexander Hamilton, as well as James Madison. They authored the Federalist Papers. Um, I think that is a pretty good take of different things that we covered. And once again, I would definitely go over your notes. We have 32 questions. I think I covered most of the main stuff that you'll see with these different founding fathers. Of course, Washington's, Franklin, and Madison, we spent quite a bit of time on. There's a lot of stuff with them. The other founding fathers we haven't spent as much time on, so you probably won't see as many answers regarding them. But definitely go over your notes and take time to study there. And we'll be looking forward to seeing you on Thursday. God bless.